think that's probably the second time that I defeated Superman with an uppercut right to the taint. Are we recording? So this is Frederick the Great to Silesian Wars, to Silesi Wars, as I like to say. I've never said that before. I'm just saying it now. And this is part 3. This was 7 parts, if I believe. That would be 3. That would be 4. That would be 5. That would be 6. So I can't count. I thought it said 7. So it'd be 6 parts. Good. I didn't want to do a 7th part anyways. But if there is a 7th part, let me know and I'll do it. So, before I get started, I had a question for you, Greg. Do you like sweet tea? You're in the South, right? It's like mandatory. It's like water, I would think. I don't know. I just started drinking some of that. Picked up a gallon of sweet tea with the fake sugar. I know, I'm a bitch. And it was really good. I remember when we went down south to Alabama, Gulf Shores, and I was like, yeah, sure, I'll try a sweet tea. And they brought it to me, and I was just like, how much sugar did you put in this? And she just looked at me, she goes, you need some more, sweetie? And I was like, no, that's plenty. That's more. When you have that much at the bottom of just sugar, I think I'm good. I just had a little flashback to that. All right, so this is going to be part 3. I did a better job understanding him. It's just I think it's just the accent, and it's just the, I don't know. And I don't want to put on, I've already went through the closed captions. But we're going to go ahead and get started. And sorry, I was dealing with glue today, so I'm picking glue out of my hair. I had glue on my shin. There was no reason for it to be there. I was wearing jeans. So it's just been a long day, and I want to try to get 3 videos done in the next hour, because I got to go in early tomorrow. So let's get started with this video right now at the Battle of
On the early morning of June 4th, 1745, Prince Charles of Lorraine and his 63,000-strong Habsburg army camped between the cities of Pilgrimshain, Huntersdorf, and Thomaswaldau. He knew the Prussian army, commanded personally by Frederick the Great, was close by. He was in hostile territory, after all. Then, amidst the darkness of the night, he heard screams, muskets firing, and general sounds of battle. Moments later, an out-of-breath infantry soldier ran into the Austrian camp. He shouted, "The Prussians are here! They are attacking our Saxon allies nearby Pilgrimshain." Charles began shouting orders at his men, for before he knew it, the battle had already broken out. In June 1742, Austria and Prussia concluded the Treaty of Breslau. Subsequently, Frederick remained an outside observer to the fighting for 24 months. He didn't idle during this time. He continued restocking his depleted treasury and rebuilding his army, making several military improvements. 2 months after Breslau, the British envoy reported that the king is augmenting his army every day. One of the main improvements was the retraining of Prussian hussars and the heavy cavalry. Because during the First Silesian War, it became painfully obvious this Prussian cavalry performed subpar compared to the well-disciplined infantry. So already after the Battle of Mollwitz, the first battle of that war, Frederick launched a grueling training regimen, which he continued after Breslau. From now on, his hussars weren't used as heavy cavalry anymore. Instead, they performed light cavalry, scouting, and acting as flexible units. Additionally, the Prussian artillery received training to make them faster on the battlefield. Frederick's zealous improvements of his army proved necessary, despite it formerly being peacetime. By late 1742,
since it was peacetime, were a lot of these other countries looking at him going, he's preparing for a war, we just don't know against who? Because, I mean, he's already come across as a pretty untrustworthy person, so if he were to say, hey, I'm not going to attack you, you'd be like, send soldiers to the border, he's coming soon.
Habsburgs managed to expel the French from Bohemia. They also occupied Bavaria, beginning a process of incorporating the electorate into the Habsburg Empire. The new year didn't bode well either. The British expanded their financial support to the Habsburgs to actual military aid. George II personally commanded his pragmatic army, scoring a victory against the French at Dettingen. During these months, the Saxons realized they gained nothing by continuing their alliance with France and Bavaria. So instead, in December, they switched sides and joined the Habsburgs. This defection was not in the least caused by Frederick's unfriendly attitude towards his allies, which he often badmouthed in public for anyone to hear. Formally, the Saxon-Austrian alliance was defensive, but everyone knew it was directed directly against Prussia. Moreover, losing Saxony as an ally posed another geopolitical problem for Prussia. Saxony's elector doubled as the King of Poland-Lithuania. He could now agree to Russian armies trekking through the Commonwealth to invade Prussia from the east. In February 1744, Frederick learned of a secret alliance signed between Austria, Great Britain, and Sardinia. Despite him not knowing for sure, he rightly assumed it was directed against him. Similarly to the First Silesian War, he felt cornered and decided not to wait for his enemies to strike first. In June, he signed a renewed offensive alliance with France. His goal was to conquer Bohemia, strengthen the Bavarian Holy Roman Emperor, and seize territories up to the Pardubitz for himself while he was at it. Then in August, he marched south together with 80,000 soldiers, a fully stocked war chest, and ample wagons to supply his soldiers. Most of Austria's troops were fighting the French near the Rhine. The poorly garrisoned province didn't stand a chance against the high morale Prussians. Within a week, they captured the city of Prague. 1 week later, they captured Tabor. But despite having momentum, things went wrong. In Frederick's History of My Own Times, he wrote, "No general committed more faults than I did during this campaign." News of the Prussian invasion reached Charles of Lorraine. Contrary to Frederick's expectations, Charles turned his entire army around and returned to Bohemia, with, as Blanding puts it, a speed usually thought to be uncharacteristic of the Austrians. Count Batthyány had already been roaming around in Bohemia, augmenting Charles's army with another 18,000 soldiers. Additionally, another 20,000 Saxons joined in late October. Suddenly, Frederick faced an army of impressive size, nearly matching his own. Not willing to face the Prussians in open battle, a prolonged campaign of recapturing minor Bohemian settlements followed. This continued until...
Why didn't he want to face the Prussians in open battle? Was it because they were just so stocked with probably weapons and soldiers? It's interesting. He had a bigger unit.
Till December, when Frederick abandoned Prague and prepared for his winter stay in Silesia. The minor skirmishes and constant harassment of supply lines resulted in a war of attrition Frederick's army wasn't prepared for. Letters from Austrian officers reveal up to 30,000 Prussians deserted by the end of 1744.
Wow.
This included officers. They hadn't even fought a real major battle yet, and Frederick's army was already crumbling. A renewed anti-Prussian alliance, the expansion of the Saxon army, and the death of Holy Roman Emperor Charles VII unnerved Frederick even more. Charles's son and heir Maximilian III Joseph opened negotiations with Maria Theresa. After a subsequent disastrous defeat for the Bavarians at Pfaffenhofen, the Peace of Füssen marked the end of hostilities between Bavaria and Austria. And things got even worse. Despite the alliance with France still standing, by spring 1745, the kingdom had withdrawn close to all their soldiers to wage war in the Low Countries. Unbeknownst to Frederick, behind his back, the great powers were already discussing the partition of Prussia. They wanted to eradicate the minor player, which they deemed already destroyed. All required was a finishing blow to tip it over the edge. But regardless of his desperate position, Frederick clung on. He left Potsdam for Silesia in March, determined to rebuild his army through recruitment and amnesty for deserters. In the Austrian camp, spirits were high. The Austrians decided to march into Silesia and strike the inevitable final blow against a faltering Prussia. By May, Charles already reached villages a bit to the southwest of Breslau. Augmented by 19,000 Saxon soldiers, he continued his march north. The initial invasion through the mountain passes was straightforward without any notable resistance. However, the Austrians were unaware this was Frederick's plan. A Prussian spy in the Austrian camp informed Charles that Frederick retreated to Breslau for a last stand. But on the contrary, Frederick aimed to lure the Austrians into the Silesian plains for open battle. As soon as they entered Silesia, things changed. Charles referred to Silesia as the most difficult country he ever had to deal with. Frederick quartered his army at a small village on a 2-hour march away from Hohenfriedberg, providing significant oversight of the Silesian plains. Austrian correspondence reveals Charles expected to meet 40,000 battered Prussians at best. Instead, nearly 60,000 awaited him. On June 3rd, Frederick received intelligence of the Austrian army marching in the plains south of his position. He ordered his men to leave the campfires burning and tents pitched, deceiving the Austrian scouts. Then they embarked on a night's march towards the Austrians.
That evening, the Austrian army camped in a long line spanning from the town of Pilgrimshain to the Strichau Lake. In contrast, the Prussians could not form battle lines in the cluttered terrain south of the Strichau. So first they used a few bridges around the Strichau to cross the river. Crossing the bridges for an army this size took quite some time. The first to cross was Lieutenant General Dumoulin, tasked with seizing the elevations in front of the Strichau. His force numbered some 6 battalions of infantry and 28 hussar squadrons. Frederick commanded the entire Prussian army himself. Sources conflict on whether he ordered not to take any prisoners preceding the battle. Prince Charles of Lorraine commanded the Habsburg army, with Johann Adolf II, Duke of Saxe-Weissenpfalz, commanding.
Sorry, I'm not pausing. Like I'm ramped up. I want to see what happens here. So I have nothing to contribute. So you're enjoying this just like I am. If you haven't seen it before, if you have and you're wanting a reaction, I apologize. I'm offering nothing right now because I'm just engulfed into what's going to happen.
The Saxons. Prussia fielded approximately 42,000 infantry, 14,500 heavy cavalry, 2,300 light cavalry, and 192 artillery guns. Light infantry and the characteristic mitre-wearing grenadiers manned the infantry lines, whereas the cavalry consisted of cuirassiers, dragoons, and hussars. The Austrians numbered some 40,000 and the Saxons up to 19,000 troops with 122 artillery pieces. The Austrian cavalry consisted of heavy cuirassiers and light Hungarian hussars. Its infantry consisted of the traditional light infantry and grenadiers. Among them walked regional regiments levied from other areas of the empire, such as the Croatian Pandurs. The Battle of Hohenfriedberg enjoyed a somewhat confusing start. Unbeknownst to Frederick, only the center of the Austrian army had lit their campfires. The Saxons and Austrian cavalry were roaming in the dark. Dumoulin soon discovered that some Saxons had already occupied the elevations. When he arrived, skirmishes broke out. And when news reached Frederick, Dumoulin was already fighting soldiers on the hilltops. He ordered 6 24-pounder guns to move onto the hill to support Dumoulin.
You know, there was a part of me that was wondering, it would be awful stupid if Saxony and I already forgot the other one. Wow. If they didn't occupy the high ground. That would be completely stupid. You know, give yourself a good elevation so you can at least have somebody scouting to make sure there isn't anything coming. So I was just like I was really interested, and I thought if they left that abandoned, that's the stupidest thing I've heard. Especially because it would be just overlooking your people. Just my 2 cents. Oh.
On the other side of the battlefield, the noise of battle alerted the Saxon and Austrian lines of the Prussian advance. In response, the Saxon and Austrian commanders began deploying parts of their army. Catching on and realizing he was losing his advantage, Dumoulin decided to bypass the hills and charge straight at the Saxon camp. However, because of the scattered nature of the Austrian and Saxon lines, most of his cavalry found themselves engaged in skirmishes before reaching the Saxon camp. In addition, the Saxon cavalry was deployed further to the west and in front of Pilgrimshain than the Prussians anticipated. The Prussians would be stuck in a pincer movement if things went wrong. Fortunately for Frederick, the Prussians maintained the upper hand against the unprepared Saxons. Before too long, Dumoulin managed to launch a charge against the main Saxon encampment. Weissenfels managed to deploy part of his cavalry and launch a counterattack against the Prussians, but to no avail. As the battle continued, parts of the Saxon infantry managed to deploy and face the Prussians, but they were outnumbered. Their position wasn't strong enough to take on the ever-advancing Prussian infantry and cavalry. Scattered, ferocious fighting continued as the Prussians captured many Saxons, including their generals.
Wow.
Meanwhile, in the background, the Prussian infantry under Prince Leopold Max of Anhalt-Dessau was finally wrapping up their deployment in the center of the improvised battle line. They began their advance.
So far, these guys know that there's a battle going on, but they don't necessarily... Oh, there's a cannon fire. So maybe now they're seeing them. Okay. I was going to say, this is still a sneak attack then for Frederick and Leopold. Moulin. I love the name. Okay, never mind. I'm wrong. I'm looking at the... I pointed. I'm looking at this cannon, so obviously they do see... And these guys here, of course, they do see them. Yeah, and there was the skirmish here. Of course they saw them. Sorry.
Against the Saxon and Austrian line. They did not mind the sporadic bombardment of the Austrian artillery. The Prussian right, facing whatever the Saxons could deploy, met combat first, but they soon littered the battlefield with blood and corpses as they fired their volleys. As battle continued, meanwhile, disaster struck the Prussian rear. Most of the army had crossed the bridges, but before a significant portion of the cavalry crossed, the bridge collapsed. As such, part of the cavalry was left behind the river. It was up to General von Zieten to find a crossing somewhere along the Striegau River. This wasn't communicated to the cavalry in the vanguard, however. By 7 a.m., Prussia largely defeated the Saxons. They were not able to resist the Prussian advance on nearly every angle of their front line.
What do you think went through Frederick's mind when he kind of looked back and he was like, we should have more cavalry coming? Did they flee? Like, do you think there was a moment of paranoia where he's looking back going, where are all my guys? Where are they at? How come they're not here? That freaked me out.
Those who survived fled the battlefield. The Austrians were left alone, but they had been deploying and were now ready for battle, albeit too late to help their allies. The Austrian infantry was positioned between Guntersdorf and Thomaswaldau, while the cavalry was positioned between Thomaswaldau and the Striegau River. The Prussian vanguard cavalry contingent was the first to...
So I apologize. Thomaswaldau and then this town over here, I didn't catch. How far of a distance is that? Does anyone know? Are we talking 10 miles? That would be insert kilometers here. Or would it be, I don't know. Because I'm just thinking that if that's a really long distance, you really have your guys spread out. But then again, you got a lot of guys. Sorry, stupid question, but I'm just curious how I'm trying to envision the battlefield, how spread out everyone would be.
Face an Austrian charge on their left. They weren't aware of the bridge in their rear collapsing and the lack of cavalry reinforcements.
Oh no.
A ferocious, savage battle ensued. The Prussians were put on the back foot by the numerically superior Austrians. Things did not look good until Zieten managed to find a ford and cross the river.
Oh.
The sudden arrival of more Prussian cavalry shocked the Austrians. Fierce combat ensued, while another cavalry contingent crossed the same ford in the background. These arrived just in time to charge against the Austrian cavalry reinforcements, which were charging against the Prussian vanguard.
Wow.
During this cavalry fight, the 1st Prussian infantry contingents advanced between Thomaswaldau and Guntersdorf. A report from the Prussian General Staff details: "It is flags flying and drums beating. It is Austrian canister shot and musket fire. It is an awesome, inexorable body of marching Prussians who refuse to disintegrate. Then it is assault by bayonet. The enemy falls back, the villages are seized. The king lowers his spyglass. The battle is won," he states. But they didn't win the battle just yet. As the infantry captured Thomaswaldau, they began firing at the Austrian cavalry from the west, succumbing to the overwhelming numbers and chaos a disorderly rout followed. Charles's army remained, however.
Wow.
Approximately 20,000 Austrian infantry held the fields between Güntersdorf and Thomaswaldau. The Prussian
Just a side note, I loved seeing this cracking and then the shattering. I think that's a really cool kind of graphic that he's doing. I really like that.
infantry moved against them like a moving wall. The Austrians bitterly contested the ground, giving rise to a terrible fire, not lasting as long as Mollwitz, but being much noisier. They appeared unstoppable. The elite Bayreuth Dragoon Regiment filled the gaps as reserves among the Prussian infantry. They would prove crucial in Prussia's victory. It is unclear how their charge materialized, but not having seen any action, the Dragoons were looking for combat. At around 8:15 a.m. they received the order to charge against the Austrians. The Dragoons rushed between the Prussian gaps straight into the Austrian front line.
Dragoons. What's their specialty? Yes, I know I could look it up, but that defeats the purpose of me asking. Cavalry, horseback, but dragoons, what is their specialty? I apologize for asking, but, I don't know. I'm a sweet boy who wants to learn this stuff when I form my own military.
They inflicted significant damage against the
My own military of dragoons and catapults, because I think that's pretty up to date.
already battered Austrian lines. Within 20 minutes, they captured 2,500 prisoners, 67 colors, and 5 artillery pieces. When the smoke lifted, the troopers
Dragoons don't mess around, do they?
were seen to be hewing into a mass of fleeing Austrians. The charge was the final nail in the Austrian coffin. By 9 a.m., the battle ended as Charles ordered the general retreat. Frederick did not commit to pursuing the Austrians despite the incredible success, allowing them to withdraw to Bohemia without harassment. All that remained was a field of ghastly carnage, thousands of dead and dying men and horses.
I apologize again. Did he say when the battle started? Because the battle ended at 9. So I'll say it started at 5 a.m. because they caught him sleeping. 4 hours and you obliterated? No, that's not it. Obliterated. You obliterated. That's even a bad choice of words. You killed a lot of people. How about that? That's a lot of death for just I'd say 5 hours. I don't know.
Days later, it became clear the total number of casualties on the Austrian side was close to 13,800, of whom 5,000 prisoners and 3,120 dead. As for Austrian generals, 4 were killed, 4 captured, and 6 mortally wounded. The Prussians suffered 4,751 casualties at best. It was an incredible victory for Prussia and Frederick personally. In the aftermath,
Just so many dead. That's the
If
thing.
you understand this one concept, you can build a 6-figure coding career within the next 8 to 16 months.
Tell me more.
Your core
Oh, darn it.
In the aftermath of the battle, Frederick sent letters to all European courts he could think of. He was happy to share his victory with the French King Louis XV and his old mentor, the Old Dessauer.
Of course he
He
was.
boasted of his victory, stating it was one of the most complete of all times, the likes of which is not seen since Blenheim. This referred to the major battle fought during the War of the Spanish Succession. He exclaimed his Bayreuth dragoons were excellent, and if this were Rome, they would have statues in their honor. In contrast, Charles was livid
A letter to Grand Duke Francis details his thoughts in the aftermath of the battle. The misfortune is all the more painful to me that our troops behaved like idiots. Forgive this expression, but I am furious. Frederick likely did not.
I don't think they behaved like idiots. They were caught off guard. I don't think you can really call them idiots. I understand you being mad that you lost to a guy you really dislike, but I mean, I don't think your guys were idiots. You got snuck up on. If anyone's to blame, you got to start at the top. You got to start with you. Did some of his people probably screw up? Absolutely. You know, that's a given. There are soldiers in every army throughout history that screw up, and they run. That's happened. It is what it is. But to call them, stupid and I don't know, man. I disagree with that, but I wasn't there, so I could be 1,000,000% incorrect.
Pursue the Austrians convinced Maria Theresa would sue for peace after such a devastating defeat. This did not happen, however. The next few months, Charles received plenty of reinforcements from Italy and Bohemia. It appeared the war was far from over. Maria Theresa wrote letters to George II to assure him she was, in fact, not losing the war. But George got cold feet. On August 26, he concluded the Convention of Hanover with Frederick. Both parties guaranteed each other their territory. And, as was all too common during this war, both sides overlooked to inform their main allies, France and Vienna. Again, Frederick's allies were less than charmed with his conduct. But for now, Frederick enjoyed a brief respite. Finally, he could take a step back, somewhat relax, and count his chickens. However, he began counting before his chickens hatched, and in an ongoing war, that is never a good idea.
I thought they were going to say that King George got cold feet and not backed out, but stopped sending money and stuff to Austria. That's what I thought they were going to say, because I thought, ooh, if that happens, man, that's difficult. But got cold feet, probably backed off a little bit, but I'm just going to guess a lot of people hated Frederick the Great. I want to be Kris the Great. For now on, I'm Kris the Great. I'm also K-Fry. I'm Kris. Yeah, I got a lot of names. Just juggle them. Alright. I'm going to end this one here. I'm going to jump right back into it. That's 3, 4, 5, 6. Headed count again just to make sure I haven't been drinking too much. Alright. I'm going to get a refill, and I'm going to sit my happy butt right back down here and get back into part 4. So until I do, thanks for watching. Have a good day. Have a good night.